Thank you for joining us today. I hope you all are doing well. My name is Raviraj Chauhan from Burlington English, and we are thrilled to have you here for an exciting webinar on assessments. We have a special guest with us who is an expert in the field of education and has a wealth of knowledge to share. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Neeta Bali. She is a highly experienced and accomplished education professional, offering over 35 years of experience in teaching, administration, and leadership. Her impressive career has been marked by a strong track record of achieving academic excellence, developing leaders, and enhancing educational programs. Her expertise encompasses curriculum development, instructional coaching, and staff training, demonstrating her dedication to fostering excellence in education. A recipient of several prestigious awards and recognition, Dr. Bali's contribution to education have been duly acknowledged. Her leadership and vision has inspired generation of student teachers and colleagues, cementing her reputation as a trailblazer in the field of education. With a unique blend of strategic thinking, pedagogical expertise, and interpersonal skills, Dr. Bali has consistently delivered results, driving improvement and innovation in diverse educational settings. Her passion of education and her commitment to making a positive impact on the lives of students and professionals alike has made her respected and sought out leader in the education community. So without further delay, I present Dr. Bali for you. Over to you, ma'am.
Very good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. It's such a pleasure to see so many people join this webinar. And thank you, Ravi, for that lovely introduction. Indeed, I have been in education for close to 4 decades now, in fact. And over a period of time, I guess, when you've been in education for that fair length of time, almost 40 years, there is so much you learn and you want to share with everyone else. I would not claim to be an expert per se. However, I'm happy to share whatever little knowledge I've gained over 4 decades with all of you. Do remember, this is not a monologue. This is a dialogue. So at any point of time, if you feel the need to intervene and contribute, just feel free. However, I would request you to put your comments and questions in the chat box, because it should not interrupt the flow of the webinar. But we are very happy to take questions at the end of the webinar. And of course, when I'm speaking, I'd be very happy to refer to what you put in the chat box, because as I said, I want you to contribute. This is not a monologue. This is really a dialogue between you and all of us at Burlington, India. So let me take this forward with, there's a short presentation. In fact, the lighter side of this, we often tell people, and I do it myself, I often tell people, when you don't have a point to make, you make a PowerPoint. However, having said that, I think PowerPoints have become like a latch-on for all of us. And sometimes it's so much easier because you tend to lose track of time and thoughts when you don't have something to refer to. So we will use a presentation, a PowerPoint, but as I said, we are not limiting this conversation. I'm calling this a conversation. This is not, I repeat, not a one-way traffic. So it's not that I have to give you knowledge and yarn and you have to lap it up or assimilate it. You're equally well equipped to contribute. Feel happy to contribute, feel free to contribute without any inhibitions. This is completely non-judgmental space. You're in a safe space, so be happy to hear your thoughts. We're talking today about assessment for student progress. Now, assessments we know are absolutely integral to teaching learning for a very primary reason, that assessments are the way we judge how much have students assimilated, how much has percolated to the students, what is the impact we've made as educators. So assessments are extremely important also to find out what is it that we need to do in order to improve teaching learning in the classroom that would strengthen student progress. So we have a mind map here. I find mind maps particularly useful because Mind maps will give you in a very, very concise and pictorial fashion. They'll give you ideas about, whatever conversations we are having. What is the purpose of assessment? In fact, there could be multiple purposes of assessment. Most important, we all know it's educational. Second, of course, is for personal development, careers. That is very important. And when you're transacting a program, for example, if you're transacting the CBSE or you're transacting the IB or Cambridge, how effectively are you transacting these programs? That is the purpose of assessment. Now, when I say educational assessment, what is the purpose of assessment in education? Obviously, it is to measure how effectively students have learned. What are the different areas where there are gaps? What are the areas where we need to address the flaws, the lacuna, where we need to improve? And of course, we need to take informed instructional decisions, and we need to assess, gauge the effectiveness of teaching methods. If I talk about personal development, assessments happen because a lot of us do psychological assessments, other assessments in order to develop ourselves as people. Because sometimes when you flounder, you don't really know whether or not you have set goals. You're floundering because you haven't really set a target or a goal. So assessments help you figure out what are your strengths, what are the goals you need to set, what is a roadmap that you need to chart out for yourself. Do remember, without a roadmap, I don't think success is possible or progress is possible. You need to identify what are your strengths, your weaknesses. You need to identify areas of growth and areas where you need to improve. And you need to identify also where is it that we need to indulge in self-awareness. The third and most important, and a very, very important one to me as an educator, is career. Because what happens generally is people get into careers, and at the end of, say, 10 and 15 years, they realize that the ladder that they have been climbing is leaning against the wrong wall. Now, if that happens, that can be rather painful, because switching careers midway, mid-career is switching to another job mid-career can be quite tough. Though I know that young people today are very adventurous and they like to move from one career to another. But I think assessments, particularly psychometric assessment, psychometric assessment is very important to determine what is your aptitude, what is your personality like, what are your interests. So API tests or psychological psychometric assessments are very important for determining what career you're suited for. What is the state of your job readiness, identifying your strengths and weaknesses. And of course, that will guide you to what kind of professional development programs you need to undertake, and it helps you to make informed decisions about your careers. Finally, as I said, as educators, all of us are transacting different programs. Now, when I say different programs, I'm talking about different curricula. We may be transacting the CBSE, we may be transacting the CISC programs, which is the ISC and ICSC. We may be transacting the IB programs, which is the PYP, the MYP, the IBDP, and the CP now. You may be transacting the Cambridge International programs, which are Cambridge Primary, CLS, which is Cambridge Lower Secondary, IGCSE, and ASNA levels. So in order to determine how well you are transacting these programs, it is important to use some kind of an assessment or measure to see, are you transacting these programs effectively? So assessment of students, assessment of the program, the assessment of teachers. So it's three-pronged approach. How are the students learning? Are they learning effectively? How effectively are we transacting the program? And that happens beautifully, particularly in IB, it happens beautifully through 5-year reviews. And that is a very strong form of assessment that helps you determine how effectively are you transacting the program in the school, and helps you determine if you're going in the right direction or if you need to change direction. So measuring the effectiveness of programs, identifying areas of improvement, informed decision making for future programs. That's very important, particularly for schools and school leaders. for school owners, ensuring accountability and transparency, particularly in program evaluation. Are teachers performing the way they're expected to perform? Is there something more they need to do? Is there need for more capacity building with teachers? If there is more need for capacity building, first you need to obviously understand whether or not we are transacting the program well. So these are four, I would say, I've broadly put it in four categories: educational, career, personal, and program evaluation. As educators, I'm sure you're able to relate, and all this resonates with you, because I know that a lot of you, I can see a lot of teachers from some fabulous schools here all over the place. Kolkata, I can see Indian public school, I think probably in Dehradun, Pune, I can see lot many more. So it's beautiful to see teachers from all across the country here. Close to about, I think, 334 teachers logged in right now. And I'm sure all this resonates with you. And this is what we need to understand as educators. Tomorrow, you could be taking this webinar with somebody else, or you could be taking a session with somebody else, and you could be talking about this. So what are the basic principles of assessment? There are some basic principles which are common to all kinds of assessment. The first is the assessment reliable? When, as educators, you set papers, or when you put up an assessment, most important to know that, is your assessment reliable? Can we really use this assessment for looking at the effectiveness of student learning? Is the assessment fair? Uh, we all know what has happened recently in the NEET examination, leading to such a uproar, and rightly so, because so many students are affected. So fairness is of prime importance. Are we fair in administering the assessment? Is it being done fairly? That there is no recourse, that no students or anyone else involved in the assessment takes recourse to any unfair means or measures. In fact, I was just looking at a video. I know it's a little out of context, but I think we need to speak about all this, particularly as educators, because we are ethically bound to speak about fairness. So when I talk about fairness, I was just looking at a video of a civil servant. In fact, I saw this on LinkedIn, a very powerful video by a gentleman who often puts videos questioning status quo, questioning the way things are, about an IAS officer, a civil servant, a recently inducted IAS officer who has assets worth crores and has gotten into the civil services under the OBC quota, which is very, very unfair. So fairness of assessments is of extreme importance. Do remember that as educators, it's your bounden duty absolutely to ensure that the assessments that you administer are fair. Authenticity. A lot of us have a tendency to cut and paste. I know there are strong rules about plagiarism, at least in the international curriculum, but try and make your assessments very, very authentic so that students are interested, they benefit immensely from it. Transparency. Be very transparent in making the assessments, telling the students about assessments, and also administering the assessments and giving the outcomes of those assessments. Be very transparent. You must always have a good mark scheme. Every time you administer an assessment, make sure that you have two things. One are a good mark scheme, and the other is perfect rubrics. Please make sure that you have well-defined rubrics which are connected to your assessment. And I know that with the blueprint that most people make now for the examination for assessment, you should have a great blueprint and a mark scheme and rubrics for assessment, so that when you administer an assessment, the results, the outcome of that assessment is such that you're able to very confidently say that I have given you these marks because this is what our rubrics look like. This is what our blueprint was, and this is what my mark scheme looks like. So here it is, that there is absolutely no ambiguity involved in the assessment. Nobody should be able to question you as educators. It is very important that nobody should be able to question what you're doing. Validity. Now, when we say validity, and also, as I said, feel free to put your comments in the chat box. I'm happy to take up your views as well. When I'm speaking, I'm happy to take up your views. And such a delight to see teachers from Aligarh, UP. I know I'm digressing a little, but it's amazing to see the number of people who have registered today and from all over. From some international schools, I can see Kalimpong, amazing, amazing. West Bengal, Asansol, Shabad, I don't know where that is, but however, amazing, amazing, superb. Let me get back to business. So when I say validity, I am talking about, is the assessment really measuring what it's supposed to measure? You know, we really have to be very mindful. If I'm testing a student's reading skills, if I'm testing a student's speaking skills, listening, and listening, speaking, reading, and writing, what is it that I'm testing? I'm talking from a perspective of a teacher of English, but what is it that you're testing? Be very sure that your assessment is valid and you're very clear about what is it that you're testing. It's good to use a whole gamut of assessment methods. It can get very monotonous because I think there is great need for innovation, and we're doing that in all curricula, including the national curriculum. We are doing that. A lot of educators now are using very innovative ways to assess. So there is summative assessment and there's formative assessment. There are multiple ways to assess a student's skill. Use a variety of assessment methods because that's interesting for children. Some can be formal assessment, some could be informal assessment, but use a variety of assessment methods, formative, summative, formal, informal. So use also, perhaps you could use various ways in particularly in the international curriculum. We know that multiple ways are used in order to be able to assess students. There's something beautiful called portfolios. I don't know if how many of you maybe are familiar with the term portfolios. Now, portfolios are a very informal way, but a very great way of assessing the cumulative work of students. When we say portfolio, a portfolio is evidence of the work which is done by the student over a period of time. Because do remember, a pen and paper test cannot necessarily gauge the learning of your children. And I would request all of you educators to check out what are portfolios. Portfolios are being used all across the world very, very beautifully. So try and figure out what are portfolios, use portfolios, particularly in the primary level, use portfolios effectively to determine, have set parameters, ask children to make their portfolios which have evidence of their learning, which could be, evidence could be in the form of photographs, could be in the form of writing, scribble, anything and everything, and let children present these portfolios. Another great way of assessing students is, and I'm speaking from the background of an international school educator, there's something called an SLC. An SLC is a student-led conference. A student-led conference is a fantastic way of assessing a student. In an SLC, as it's called, students, parents, and teachers, there are three stakeholders, students, teachers, and parents. But amongst these three stakeholders, in the SLC, only student presents the work, the parents and the teachers listen, and there is no intervention whatsoever from the teacher. Now, can you imagine what this kind of an assessment will do to a student's levels of confidence when children take on the process of SLC, when schools take on the process of SLC, particularly in the primary classes? It boosts the self-esteem of the children by many, many notches because they are presenting to their parents and to their teachers in a very comfortable and safe environment and in a very non-judgmental environment. So teachers, my recommendation is use portfolios and use SLC effectively, immaterial, even if you're teaching the national curriculum, absolutely immaterial, because till grade 8, you have the freedom to use whatever form of assessment you want. You have the freedom to innovate. So don't let the diktats of curriculum confine your creativity, should not curb your creativity at all. So use whatever assessment methods you feel are going to work well. And two, I have already mentioned to you. Um, Very important, sometimes in our enthusiasm as teachers, we get carried away and we don't really think of what are the learning outcomes of my assessment. Before you take on an assessment, define clearly what are going to be the learning outcomes of this assessment. What is it that I want to figure out? What is it that I want to determine? What is it that what is the kind of information I want to gather? What is it that I want my children to learn? Very clearly define the learning outcomes. For example, if we were to take, I'm giving you an example. If we were to take, let's say, portfolios, think about creativity, think about presentation, think about originality of ideas, think about articulation. When you talk of SLC, think about articulation. All right, these are real life skills. All of us talk about, try and link your assessments with 21st century skills. All the time we are harping on 21st century skills, cultivating 21st century skills among students. So what are these 21st century skills? Articulation, presentation, collaboration. You can work on collaborative projects. Collaborative projects and group work can be used very effectively for assessment. Divide your class into small groups, give them a task to accomplish, ask them to make a presentation as a group, and you will see 21st century skills emerge beautifully. The art of collaborating with your peers, that is most important, and that will probably come in handy later in life. So please make sure when you do your assessments, when you design your assessments, learning outcomes are defined, and also you are incorporating into your assessment the skills, because incidentally, you're all as educators, I'm sure, know that there are fabulous skill subjects that are now being taught across the country in national curriculum. And a lot of schools are now opting for these beautiful skill subjects. So when we're talking about skills, make sure assessments also take into account um, the skills that students are supposed to inculcate when you're assessing them. So assess those skills. The skills of critical thinking, skills of collaboration, skills of presentation, articulation, problem solving. Make sure researching. So define skills. So at least 6 skills I've given you: researching, articulation, collaboration, gathering information. Make sure that you are able to assess based on clear learning outcomes. How reliable are your assessments? So use standardized procedures for administering and scoring assessments. It is important that you have clear procedures for administering any kind of an assessment. Before you decide to administer an assessment, define clearly what are the procedures you're going to follow, what are the norms that you want students to conform to. The examinees must be oriented, not just you, your co-teachers and the examiners must be oriented on the procedures of an assessment. Let them know about what are your expectations. How do you mean to administer the assessment? Inform them very clearly of the protocol involved with a particular assessment and the scores. How will the scores be, computed? So let them know also how the scores are going to be computed. Ensure inter-rater reliability for subjective assessment. Now, when I say inter-rater reliability, what I'm trying to say is when an assessment is subjective, in the objective assessments and short answers, you can always make do with a very good mark scheme and rubrics. But when you have subjective assessments, it is very, very important to have somebody else. Make sure there is moderation. Now, when I say inter-rater reliability, I'm actually talking about moderation of answer scripts. Any two assessors, any two examiners, when they're looking at a subjective assessment, will have very different viewpoints on how a student is performed. Make sure that you moderate the answer scripts so that there is whatever degree of objectivity you can have, you must have a certain degree of objectivity, particularly in subjective assessments. Otherwise, your examinees stand to lose. And I know that as teachers, as educators, our aim is to help every student under our care. So do that, use inter-rater reliability. Consistency and dependability of assessment results, very important. Your students should not have to ask you to reassess their scripts. Inevitable that when we administer an exam or an assessment, there are bound to be glitches here and there, and students will inevitably ask for a reassessment, or a remarking or a reevaluation. But as far as possible, please try and avoid a situation where you have to reassess an exam result and re-look at results. That does not reflect well and definitely detracts from the credibility of an examiner and an examination or assessment system. So as far as possible, maintain a degree of objectivity and make sure that the assessment results are consistent, dependable, and can be relied on. So when we say that, how do you maintain that kind of consistency? You do that by using completely standardized procedures. So when you have a clear standardized procedure for administering, as I said, where you are articulating your expectations from the examinees and from your co-teachers, and you're administering the assessment very, very objectively. And when you're scoring assessments, as I said, have a clear set of rubrics and mark schemes so that students are aware that this is how the assessment has been marked. Of course, needless to say, when I said you must consult your co-teachers, the co-examiners, moderation is important, very, very important that you have a policy of moderation. As a principal and as a director of a school, we always did this. I would always ask my teachers, once they finished correcting about 5 scripts, the same scripts were given to another teacher who was asked to mark. And we then figured out how different was the marking between the 2 or 3 teachers who marked the same scripts to understand how well how objectively the scripts were being marked. Of course, there are tolerance limits when you do international. Many of you may be international examiners for IB, you can relate with this, that there can be a little bit of a digression here and there. You may have a few extra marks given by one examiner, a few less marks given by another. But as long as it is within the tolerance limits, it is all right, it's being fair. The other thing is provide equal opportunities for all students to demonstrate their knowledge and skills. And here, in fact, that's point number 3. I also want to say equal opportunities to all students. We have to understand also that there are children with special needs. Now, these children will need accommodations, we call them. Accommodations in exams. Accommodations in assessment are making some kind of concessions for students who may have a learning difficulty. I will not call it a disability, I will call it a learning difficulty. It could mean uh, appointing a scribe for the student. It could also mean allowing them some additional time. It could mean allowing them to attempt a certain set of questions which can be culled from the main paper, particularly if it's an in-house assessment. You can always cull a certain portion which is meant for these students who may not be able to attempt sustained answers. So equal opportunities, but then definitely accommodating diverse learning needs and styles. Avoid bias in assessments. As far as possible, we all know that as teachers, as individuals, we always have our favorites and we have not so favorite students. But do remember somebody's career could be at stake because of a bias. So, for heaven's sake, as teachers, as educators, just be very, very objective, be compassionate, show empathy, make sure that you do not reflect any bias in your assessments. How is it that we figure out diverse learning needs and styles? Um, some of the ways we have done it is through surveys and questionnaires. When you administer surveys and questionnaires, you gather insights from a diverse group of individuals and you figure out what kind of an assessment to design. And I really think students and parents should have a say in this. You should float surveys and questionnaires to students, parents, and your colleagues. Interviews, speak to people, speak to stakeholders, find out what is it that you need to do to make your assessments effective. Talking to people, even when we're talking today, I'm sure there are a lot of insights you're gaining. Some of you may be able to share your insights. Have FGDs. FGDs are focus group discussions. During FGDs, bring up the topic of assessment and how is it that we can improve the pattern of assessment? How is it we can make our assessments objective? How is it that we can make our assessments interesting? You will find that people have a lot to contribute during FGDs. Observe carefully and analyze behavior events. You will find out what kind of assessments to administer. Use a SWOT analysis when you're looking at your assessment. Sit down, put your head to the grind, look at the assessments and do a SWOT and find out what are the strengths of your assessment, what are the weaknesses, what opportunities do these assessments offer to improve, what could be possible threats if these opportunities are not taken, what could be possible threats if you do not improvise and improve. Remember, education is all about improvising, improving, unlearning and relearning, and attempting everything which is new and innovating. All the time, we are talking about design thinking with children. We are talking about innovation in the classrooms. But I think the first move has to come from us as educator. We need to improve. We need to educate. Transparency, clearly communicating the assessment criteria. This is very important. Uh, very clearly tell your children, tell the students, tell the prospective examinees that this is the assessment criteria. This is how you're going to be assessed. These are the rubrics. Be mindful, this is how you're going to be assessed. So make sure that you prepare yourself accordingly. Make sure that you also, during your dummy exams, whatever, your pre-boards, particularly with board classes, your pre-boards or, a pre-assessment exercise, you explain the criteria and expectations to students. The other thing is do not sit on your assessments, give feedback in a timely manner. Any kind of feedback which is delayed loses its impact and students lose interest. You would often find that children are very keen. They're very interested in finding out how they would have done in an examination or an assessment. The excitement will die down if you do not give your feedback in a timely manner. It is very important to give your feedback in a timely manner. And also remember, it is important to give constructive feedback. Feedback is not about tearing down people. Feedback is not about destroying people's self-esteem. A feedback is about helping people improve. Give constructive feedback, feedback which is suggestive, which allows people to look at how they can improve. That is the purpose of assessment. I will use a strong term. Assessment is not a witch hunting exercise. Please do remember that. It's not a witch hunting exercise, so do not use that as witch hunting exercise at all. Involve students in the assessment process and decision making. There is this beautiful term which I want to share with all of you. I'm sure you know. There's something called student agency. When I say student agency, it means empowering the children to be a part of the decision-making process. When you involve children in a process, do remember there is a sense of accountability and responsibility that children experience. And it's inevitable that the children will end up enjoying the assessment more. And let me tell you, children have great ideas. In fact, young people have great ideas. And often you'd be surprised that their ideas are far more interesting than probably a lot of ideas that we have to offer. So involve children in decision making, use student agency. Let this word just sink in, student agency. So this is a repetition, provide constructive, specific, and timely feedback, involve students in the assessment process and decision making. We just spoke about student agency. Now, how to align assessment with system improvement? Assessments are not just for assessing people. Assessments also give us very clear indicators about what is it in our system that we need to improve. So assessments will help you to find out what are the key areas for improvement within the system. And then you need to align your assessment methods with the system improvement goals. And then implement changes based on assessment findings. Identify key areas for improvement within the system. Look at your current practices and processes. If I'm only doing a pen and paper exam, how do children find it? Do children find it monotonous, boring, a burden, a pain? Is there something else I could do probably to improve on the current practices and process? Is there any other form of assessment I could use which could be interesting for children? Define specific objectives and targets for each area of improvement. Now, let us say if your examination or assessment system is very monotonous, if you're giving a certain kind of questions, you're giving short answer questions, you're giving structured questions, you're giving long answer questions, let us say in business studies and economics, you could give, and I am sure you're doing that, a lot of you must be doing that, you could give excellent case studies. And those case studies could be based on areas of topical interest. Pick up areas of topical interest from within the financial financial system of the country. Look at something which is contemporary and try and relate. Excuse me. Try and relate what you're teaching or assessing with whatever's happening around you. Make sure that your assessments are topical in nature. When I say topical, you can relate them to what's happening around you. Conduct a comprehensive assessment of current practices. Look at data. Let me tell you, data speaks. Data never lies. So please, all of you, and I've learned this a little late in life because I started teaching in 83, so that was way back. But today I realize that without data and trends, I am not able to identify strengths and weaknesses. Make sure that you collate data, you create dashboards, share with your colleagues, with your management, and find out what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses. The other thing is speak to stakeholders. And when I say stakeholders, students, colleagues, parents, very, very important to speak to parents, because parents are able to give us some very effective ways of looking at how we can improve things in school. This is the same thing, gather feedback from all stakeholders on areas that need improvement. Define specific objectives and targets for each area, set benchmarks, and set SMART goals for clarity and accountability. Use qualitative and quantitative data. I just finished telling you Data speaks, data never lies. Use data. Monitor your progress very effectively and in a time-bound manner towards your goals and objectives. Look at your areas of success, applaud people for successes, but at the same time, also let them know what are the areas where they could improve and speak about it relentlessly. Develop an action plan. Please make sure that you develop a clear action plan for improvement. Assign responsibilities. Administrators here, I know that most administrators like to play the Hercules. They like to have the entire burden on their own shoulders. Don't do that. Please make sure that there is delegation and decentralization. Involve other people, involve everybody else, assign responsibility, give them timelines, ask for accountability, and make sure that your system improves with very clear goals and objectives too, so that you can improve your assessment. Smart goals, we all know, time-bound goals, goals which are realistic. Make smart goals to ensure clarity and accountability, establish benchmarks. How will you measure your success? Align assessment methods with system improvement goals. I've spoken about surveys, interviews, observation, and performance metrics. Now, there's something called the KRAs and the KPIs. I'm sure as administrators, principals, directors, heads of department, all of you are using performance metrics and KPIs. Make sure that you also include assessment in your KPIs. And that's very important, because what kind of results are you as teachers delivering? In fact, you don't even have to have an administrator do that. Set your own benchmarks and see where you have improved your results. Target setting for teachers is very, very important where assessments are concerned. Teachers, please set targets for yourself. And let me tell you, all these things in the long run will help you grow immensely as teachers. And eventually, many of you will land up as principals and directors and so on, and great administrators. But make sure that you set targets, you set goals, and these are smart goals, and that you improvise and improve how you are administering assessments and how you are tackling teaching learning. So implement changes which are assessed, which are based on the findings of your assessment. I want to talk about the Burlington VTest, because this webinar is by Burlington, and I'd like to inform you that Burlington VTest is a very, very popular form of assessment. Burlington VTest for schools is for two age groups, 7 to 10 and 11 to 15. And there is a Burlington VTest for general English. So VTest for schools, it's flexible, very cost effective, and can be trusted very well by learners, teacher, parents, and policymakers. So it'd be nice if you check out. There is a general test, this is interesting. This is a general test. In fact, I would recommend all of you take a good look at this. This is best suited for teachers and administrators. It's for skill mapping and language auditing, which is so important for LSRW. Take a look at the VTest General English, Burlington VTest for General English, which could be very useful for most of you. So why Burlington VTest stands out? Accessible, online test, a modular approach. Students can take all 4 skills together or staggered manner. Gamified testing. Now, that's very interesting. For 7 to 10, the version uses the gamified approach with virtual rewards and for students and their friends to keep students engaged. It's adaptive. When it's adaptive, what we mean is the difficulty level increases gradually according to the student's ability. The best thing is there's no pass or fail. So it is a diagnostic test. So there is no pass or fail. You don't fail in this examination. And it's feedback oriented, because the feedback or diagnostics are very comprehensive in nature and give you a detailed report breaking down your strengths and areas of improvement. I think these tests are just so useful. Yeah, so feedback oriented. So each student receives a detailed score report breaking down strengths and areas of improvement by skill. And if any of you are interested, you should reach out to the Burlington team. You should be able to show you a sample of a score report, which will give you a very clear idea of what a VTest stands for. Well, that was that. And I think now the floor is open to questions. And I would invite Mr. Raviraj Chauhan to join me in addressing whatever questions you have. Feel free to ask questions. Feel free to express or share any ideas you have, and we'd be happy to answer them. So the floor is open to a Q&A, please.
Thank you, ma'am, for this wonderful session. First of all, it was really an informative and motivating session, and you very well touched the importance of assessment, which is there, just not, in a student's life, but also in our daily lives for everyone. So I'll just start without wasting time. I'll just start with a question. So there's a question from Candace Ross. It says, what are the types of assessment which we can take instead of pen and paper?
Ravi, would you like to answer that? Shall I answer?
Sure. Sure. So Candice, as far as the assessment is concerned, see, yes, I think there are assessments which are there, which can be done with pen and paper, but the assessments that we are talking here, as ma'am also mentioned in our webinar, it's which should have reliability, which should give you a tangibility, and which should be accurate. So when we talk about all these features of an assessment, I think a computer-based assessment, and which we say it's an AI-based adaptive assessment, is far much better than pen and paper assessment, because it is adapting to a student's level. So if a student is answering a question correctly, the next question that comes up to a student's screen or the gentleman's screen who's given the assessment will be a tougher question. So the level is increasing with the question kind of answer the student is giving. And if the question is answered incorrectly, so the next level is a slightly lesser level than the level that he's already attained. So in this way, if you go for an assessment which is a computer-based assessment, it will be more accurate for you. Number one, there will be a fairness, and the third thing, and the most important thing, is it will give you a tangibility to whatever you want to assess, whether it is maths, English, or any other field. It gives you a tangibility to your assessment.
Ravi, the next question is, how do they register for these assessments for VTest?
Fabulous. So as far as registration is concerned, we have a website called www.vtest.com. You can simply go ahead and check out all the features in the assessment. There's an ID also which we would like. It's called vcare@Burlington English. I'm just putting it on the chat. Right? You can just simply send your request here to us, and my team, which is there in the field, will go ahead and actually connect you from our end.
Okay, Ravi, the next question is VTest adaptive to children with special needs?
Yes, it is. It is. So we have the feature there. We've taken care of all the children who have a special need. And personally, if you ask me, I do not go ahead and I synergize with the word called, children with special needs. Children is children. I think it is we who have to adapt with whatever the God has given us, or, so we do take care of all those kind of things.
Okay. And the next question is, from where can we get Burlington VTest? I think everyone will get an email with a link, perhaps,
Yes.
if that is a question.
So we would be sending mailers to everyone. I guess, Sri, there will be a certificate that will be sent to everybody who's attended this webinar. And with those certificates, you will be getting a registration link, and you will also be getting information with regards to VTest. So we are just a phone call or an email away. Whenever and whatever time you feel like you want to actually go ahead and assess your students, yourself, or the administration, we are there to help you out with it.
Right.
Ma'am, I think there's a question. What are the main steps in a writing process?
Main steps in a writing process. That's a question for a teacher of English, huh? I'm in the process of writing books. So in fact, that is one of the things I was thinking about yesterday. Now, here is the thing. When we talk about writing, there are different kinds of writing. First, as an assessor or as a teacher, you need to figure out what kind of writing do you want, I mean, what kind of writing task do you want to give your children? Let us say if it's an event, if it's a descriptive task, we're describing an event. Now, just going to some very simple ways of doing it. Let's say, as I said, a description of an event, writing task based on that. So you just ask some WH questions. What is the event? Just give children these clues. What is the event? When did the event happen? Where did the event happen? Who was involved in the event? What were the outcomes? And give a brief description. So WH questions, if it's a descriptive event. Now, if we are talking about, let us say, we are talking about a discursive piece of writing, that will vary completely from a descriptive piece of writing. So if you're talking about discursive writing, then you're obviously talking about something which will have 2 points of view. So first, your topic. So, what are let's say if you're talking about the advantages of using AI and the disadvantages of using, let's say, ChatGPT. The advantages of using ChatGPT, the disadvantages. The advantages, of course, you will talk about how quickly you're able to ferret out the information you want, how it enables you to complete your tasks on time. Information is readily available. You do not waste time researching for information. What is the flip side? The flip side is, I guess, to a great degree, it definitely hampers your creativity and your original thinking. I personally, as a teacher, I'm beginning to rely so much on ChatGPT. So I know it definitely detracts from originality and creativity. All right. And a lot of people have a tendency to simply cut and paste. So if you're talking about discursive, the pros and cons, the two sides of a coin. So it'll vary. Now, if it's narrative, you're describing an event or a story or an experience. If you're narrating, then that's going to be what is the experience? What are the feelings that experience? When did that experience happen? When, WH questions. What are the feelings, emotions that experience evoked in you? Who are the other people involved? So writing process essentially varies from one kind of writing to another. So that's not a question I can answer very quickly, but broadly, as I said, look at each piece of writing, examine carefully the nature of that piece of writing, and then determine the flow. And it's very easy to determine the flow. Like I said, the WH questions in case of an event, when you're describing descriptive writing, what, when, where, who, what was the outcome, who were the people involved, and what was the impact, the WH questions. And similarly, in discursive, I told you two sides of the coin, and narrative, I just told you about the narrative. So it really varies from one piece of writing to another. But I'd be happy to answer more questions. If at all you have more questions, send them to Burlington. They'll forward it to me, I'll answer.
And we have one more question from Swati Priya. She says, respected ma'am, pen and paper assessment is the kind of compulsion in the schools. So how can we make it more interesting for the students rather than the traditional rote one?
So Swati, here is the thing. Who says it's a compulsion? Till grade 8, Swati, every school has the liberty to experiment with the kind of teaching learning they want in a classroom and the kind of assessment they want to administer. To begin with, Swati, it is not a compulsion. But yes, you must have evidence of learning. Assessment is supposed to give you the outcome of learning and evidence of learning. So how are you going to get that evidence of learning? I spoke when I was speaking to you all, I spoke about portfolios. Now, when you have to first change your mindset and educate the parents that pen and paper is not the only way of measuring learning outcomes. Let's say a portfolio, as I said, it's a beautiful way of determining learning outcomes over a period of time. If you maintain a file with children's work, which is a clear evidence on how they started on day 1 when the school reopened after summer break, 2 months hence, what kind of work have they done? And if you've kept it all in portfolios, And those portfolios are marked against a benchmark portfolio that you would have created. That will give parent a very clear idea. And there is clear evidence of learning because you're telling the parent, here is the benchmark portfolio, here is your child's work. And I think the child enjoyed doing this assessment so thoroughly, creating this portfolio so thoroughly compared to a pen and paper test. Having said that, there's going to be many, many years before we can do away with pen and paper tests. But as Ravi rightly said, the AI-assisted testing, that's another great way of testing students. And I know that all schools now are IT enabled, and every school, I know that AI has been introduced as a subject. Strangely, AI is being taught from books like any other subject, which is very, very strange. Let's wake up. Let's use AI assisted evaluation. So you are the one. Please remember, teachers, you are the change makers. You don't have to ask. Till grade 8, you are absolutely free and you should be experimenting. And your management should be open to seeing teachers who can innovate. So just go out there, experiment with portfolios, experiment with AI-assisted teaching, learning, online tests which can be checked and completed. You know, the evaluation, the results of evaluation can be given immediately. That will be so interesting. Also try peer assessment. You know, this I was just thinking when Ravi was talking to you about different ways of assessing. There are so many ways you can assess. There's something called think, pair, and share. You know, so you divide your class into groups, ask them to think about something, pair the students, ask them to work out, put together their thoughts in pairs, and then present and share their thoughts, and then mark them on that exercise. So use think, pair, and share. There are multiple ways you could assess students. So there is no there is something called there's something also called I spoke about there's something called three-way summaries, and I spoke about SLC. When I was speaking to you, I spoke about SLC, a student-led conference. Now that's a fantastic way of testing students, and it's an exercise everybody enjoys so thoroughly. So when you have three-way summaries, in three-way summaries, children can work individually, they can work in groups. You give them a topic, you give them a prompt, and they write 3 different summaries, 10 to 15 words, 30 to 50 words, 75 to 100 words. And then you can look at how they have written and figure out how well they have learned. So there are multiple ways of testing children. I think if you research, you'll be able to come across fantastic ways you can conduct your formative assessment and your summative assessment. These are some suggestions I've given you, but there are hordes of them on the internet. So go out there, and I think you can make your assessment very powerful. Don't confine yourself only to pen and paper. I hope that somewhat answers your question. Any further questions, Shrikant?
Yes. So ma'am, this one is a bit interesting one, which says it's from Naz Hanif, and it says, I wanted to ask, I guess, ma'am, first thing, people really love you, ma'am. They're just quoting questions. So I wanted to ask the people who have a habit of rote learning, how can they develop a habit to understand the content and concept, because rote learning works at an extent, but still doesn't help anyway unless the concept is cleared in your mind.
So what is it that you would want? You're trying to speak about the fact, see, to a certain degree, rote learning is necessary. I'm not propagating rote learning at all. But to some degree, rote learning is necessary if you're learning the formulae, if you're learning some theorems, probably rote learning may be necessary. All right. But having said that, I think now we are slowly moving away from rote learning, because if you look at the assessment patterns, even in CBSE, in the national curriculum as well, I think we are moving away from rote learning, because the questions are so designed that they test your understanding of concepts and your application. And particularly if you're going to Cambridge and IB, This has existed for years. You cannot go through a Cambridge exam, whether it is at the primary or the Cambridge Lower Secondary or the ASNA levels, or it's in the IB, whether it's the MYP. So assessment has really moved away completely, at least in the international curriculum. And CBSE is making very focused efforts to ensure that rote learning is discouraged. But yes, to some degree, definitely you need to patronize rote learning, because as I said, for some reasons, rote learning is important, formulae and so on and so forth. So rote learning is important. Any other question that, because generally see the rote, there is something called a rote loop. You know, a rote loop is exam, you have an exam, you forget, then you prepare and learn, and then have an exam, and then you forget, and then you re-prepare, learn, and then you have an exam, and then you forget. Right? That's what happens with rote learning. But when rote learning is discouraged and there is more, the questioning is more application based, the learning is going to last a lifetime. And more than anything else, you know, if you make your learning experiential and then test children, I think your learning will last a lifetime. Is there any other question that we may answer?
I think, Ravi, there is one last question, ma'am. So there is this question from Ms. Judith Middleton. And her question is, how can we teach and use international pattern to children who come from metric board?
Come again, Shrikant, you'll have to repeat that question for me.
How can we teach and use international pattern to children who come from the metric board, a state board, perhaps?
Yeah. By and by. Because first, as educators, please look at what are the strengths of international curriculum. Examine those strengths. The most significant strength of international curriculum is the fact that it teaches you researching skills, right? Having said that, researching skills are not the monopoly of international curriculum. You as teachers of state board can also ask students to research for information, right? So what's stopping you? Give them a topic, give them some questions which lead them to research for information. Ask them to collate the data, bring it back to, or collate the information, bring it back to class, and then turn it into a fabulous learning experience when they share their learning that they have gathered through the information that they have researched for. So to begin with, please remember that the nuances of international curriculum are for all to benefit from. And you can always pick up those nuances, adapt them and customize them to suit the needs of your learners. All right. So you can bring that beauty of the international curriculum into your classroom very, very easily. All right. There's nothing that can stop you. Please don't glamorize international curriculum. Look at the basics of international curriculum and what are the value additions, and bring that the uniqueness of the learning style by customizing it for your children. Like I said, research. That's the easiest way to do it. Any other question before we close? So,
Ravi, I think the last question has been asked. There are a lot of questions, ma'am, but I think due to the paucity of time, and also very interesting questions, but due to the paucity of time, I think, Ravi, we can thank the audience. Yes, and also, ma'am.
Yes, so as I said, when we are overwhelmed with the questions that are coming, I think we will put in these questions on an email to you, and most of them can be answered, and we'll send back, we'll send back these answers to the participants. I think thank you very much to all of you, and I hope this session from our side was informative and exciting and motivating for you. We will keep on bringing such sessions in the future as well. A very big thank you to ma'am for your knowledge sharing with us. And it was an honor to actually host you with us at Burlington and, see and your insights and all the questions that you answered for our participants. Thank you very much, ma'am, once again.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed my session thoroughly, enjoyed taking this webinar with Ravi and Sri. And
you.
thank you for participating in such large numbers and have a great, great evening.
Fabulous, fabulous. Thank you, everyone. We hope you have a very good evening. Let's till the time we meet again. Goodbye from our side. Thanks, Sri. Thanks, ma'am.